Rain poured relentlessly on the city streets, drumming against the glass windows of the upscale café with a rhythm as unforgiving as the world outside. Inside, the air was warm, filled with the scent of roasted coffee beans and the soft hum of polite conversation. But at a corner table near the entrance, a storm far more human and devastating was about to unfold. Talia, a young black woman barely in her 20s, stood frozen in the middle of the polished marble floor, her trembling hands clutching a small paper bag. Her eyes, wide with fear and shame, darted between the cold gaze of the man looming over her and the indifferent crowd of cafe patrons. He was dressed sharply in a tailored suit, his hair slicked back, but none of his sophistication could mask the venom in his words. "You dare bring this into my establishment?" He snapped, his voice slicing through the gentle clink of teacups like a blade. "Do you think this is a charity, that I care about your pathetic little problems?" Talia's throat tightened. She had rehearsed what she would say 100 times in her head, but the words now stuck somewhere between her fear and disbelief. Her heart pounded painfully against her ribcage. My mother, she's sick. I only wanted to—" Her voice cracked, the paper bag shaking in her hands as she spoke. The man, the cafe's manager, sneered, stepping closer, his polished shoes echoing on the marble floor. "Sick, sick. This is not a soup kitchen, girl. You think I have time for your sob story?" His tone dripped with contempt, and every syllable landed like a hammer on her fragile courage. Around them, the cafe patrons exchanged glances, some shifting uncomfortably in their seats, others whispering behind their hands. Yet not one person rose to intervene. Talia felt the walls closing in, suffocating her. Her stomach knotted and a tear slipped down her cheek. I only wanted to help her," Talia whispered, her voice barely audible, more to herself than to him. "Help her," he barked, his face twisting into a cruel mask of superiority. "You think you belong here talking about helping? Look at you, messy hair, ragged clothes, no manners, no money. You're nothing but a beggar." The words hit her like stones. Every ounce of courage she had clung to melted away under the weight of his scorn. The customer's silence was deafening, a collective affirmation that she was alone, powerless, invisible. She stumbled back, nearly dropping the paper bag, and a small can of soup inside it rolled across the floor. Her eyes followed it as if it were her only lifeline in that moment. But the manager wasn't done. "Pick that up, girl, and maybe, just maybe, consider that some people don't belong anywhere." He smirked, turning his gaze toward the other customers, as if daring anyone to protest. No one did. The humiliation was almost unbearable. Talia felt her knees weaken, and she pressed her hands to her face, trying to hide the tears. The manager laughed, a cold, sharp laugh that bounced off the high ceilings. "Pathetic," he muttered under his breath, shaking his head. Then, just as she thought she couldn't bear another second of this, a quiet hush fell over the cafe. A presence entered the room that commanded attention without a word. Heads turned instinctively, conversations faltering mid-sentence. All eyes now focused on the doorway. Talia lifted her tear-streaked face, squinting through the haze of her despair, and saw the figure step inside. It wasn't just anyone. It was a person whose mere presence radiated authority and compassion, whose eyes held the weight of wisdom and kindness all at once. The manager, caught off guard, instinctively straightened his posture, a flicker of unease crossing his face. But arrogance quickly replaced it. He sneered again, stepping slightly forward, as though he could intimidate anyone in the room with sheer audacity. But then the stranger spoke, not loudly, not forcefully, but in a calm, deliberate voice that sliced through the tension like sunlight piercing a storm cloud. "That's enough." The manager froze. The word alone carried a weight that made the air itself seem denser, almost electric. Talia blinked, confused, hope flickering in her chest like a fragile candle. The stranger's eyes softened as they turned to her. "Are you all right, young lady?" There was no judgment, only concern. No one had asked her that in what felt like a lifetime. Talia swallowed hard, unable to respond. Her voice had disappeared, stolen by fear, shame, and disbelief. The manager's face twisted into a scowl. "And who are you supposed to be? Another one of her little friends trying to play hero?" His voice rose, now edged with panic and anger. "Do you even know what kind of people you're dealing with?" The stranger stepped closer, unwavering, their gaze steady and unshakable. "I know exactly what kind of people I'm dealing with," they said softly, yet every word resonated with authority. "And you are about to learn a very important lesson." The cafe went silent. The patrons leaned forward in their seats, sensing the electricity in the room, the brewing storm they were powerless to stop. Talia's heart raced, hope sparking for the first time in hours. But just as the tension reached its peak, the stranger's lips curled into a faint, enigmatic smile. A smile that carried the promise of justice, of redemption, of secrets about to be revealed. And then the manager's face paled. Because little did the cruel manager know, his life was about to be turned upside down. Because a stranger standing in the crowd knew a secret about this girl that would shock everyone. A secret that would expose truths so powerful, so unimaginable that no one, including him, would ever look at her the same way again. Talia's tear-filled eyes widened, and the paper bag slipped from her hands, clattering to the floor as her pulse thundered in her ears. Every patron in the cafe felt it, the calm before a storm unlike anything they had ever seen. And just like that, the present began to blur. The bustling noise of the cafe faded into a whisper, and the world seemed to tilt around her. Everything was about to change. Let's go back to how this story truly began this morning. The morning sun had barely risen over the city when Talia stirred from a restless sleep. The thin curtains of her small apartment fluttered in the gentle breeze, casting pale streaks of light across the worn wooden floor. The apartment was modest, so modest that every creaking floorboard, every chipped corner of the walls seemed to whisper of years of struggle and perseverance. Yet despite the poverty, there was warmth here. Talia's home was small, but it was filled with love, laughter, and the quiet courage of those who refused to surrender to hardship. Talia sat up on the edge of her bed, stretching her aching muscles. She was barely 22, but her eyes, deep, brown, and resolute, belied a maturity far beyond her years. Her hair, tied loosely in a bun, had streaks of dust from last night's work. Her clothes were simple, a faded shirt with a small tear near the hem, pants patched at the knees. But even in these humble garments, Talia carried herself with an air of dignity that no poverty could erase. The apartment was already alive with faint sounds. Her younger brother, Malik, no more than 8, was kneeling on the floor, coloring in a tattered notebook, his tongue sticking out in concentration. The faint wheezing of her mother, Layla, came from the small bedroom. She had been sick for months, battling a condition that medicine could barely touch, her body frail yet her spirit unbroken. Talia's heart ached at the sight of her family. Life had dealt them cruel hands, yet they found small moments of joy. Malik's laughter when he finally finished a drawing of a soaring bird, Layla humming softly despite her pain, the smell of the weak morning tea Talia had managed to brew. These little things were treasures in a world that often felt cruel and unforgiving. She moved quietly to the kitchen corner, preparing a meager breakfast. The small gas stove hissed as she poured water into a pot, stirring what little oatmeal they had. Money was tight. She had worked long hours the previous day cleaning offices, hoping to stretch their earnings enough for groceries and the prescription her mother desperately needed. Her reflection in the cracked kitchen mirror caught her attention. Her face bore the faint shadows of sleepless nights, of worry etched deeply into her features. And yet there was a softness too, a kindness that glowed even in the hardest of times. Talia had always been the kind of person who would give the shirt off her back to someone in need, even if it meant going without herself. It wasn't weakness. It was the strength of someone who understood that humanity was measured not in wealth, but in compassion. The urgency of today's problem pressed down on her like a weight. Layla's medicine was nearly gone, and without it, her mother's condition could deteriorate rapidly. Malik's school lunch money had already run out, and his stomach growled with hunger. Rent was due, and the landlord's patience was wearing thin. Every single challenge seemed to converge on this one morning, and Talia knew she had no choice but to act. She paused at the door, glancing back at her family. Malik's wide eyes met hers, full of trust and unspoken hope. Her mother's frail hand reached for her briefly, giving a weak squeeze. Talia inhaled sharply. She had to be strong. For them, she had to find a way. Wrapped in her old, threadbare coat, she stepped into the bustling streets. The city was alive, a cacophony of car horns, chatter, and hurried footsteps. The chill of the morning air bit at her cheeks, but she barely noticed. Her mind was focused entirely on one goal. She had to find someone who could help, someone who could provide even the smallest relief for her struggling family. Every step felt heavier than the last. Talia was painfully aware of the stares as she walked past expensive shops, the judgment in people's eyes. Many assumed, by her appearance alone, that she was someone to be ignored, dismissed, or worse, mocked. But Talia had faced this her entire life. She had learned to move with quiet dignity, to carry herself with a strength that often surprised those who underestimated her. Her destination was a high-end café, one she had never entered before, but she had heard from a neighbor that they sometimes helped the needy in small ways. Today, she hoped for that small mercy. The very thought of asking for assistance made her stomach twist, her pride burning, but desperation outweighed pride. As she walked, memories of her past flashed in her mind. She remembered her childhood, living in this same neighborhood, playing in empty lots with Malik when they were too young to understand how limited their lives were. She remembered Layla's quiet determination, always finding a way to make ends meet, always teaching Talia the value of compassion and integrity. "Kindness is the one thing they can never take from you, Talia," her mother used to say. "No matter how poor we are, your heart can be rich." And so Talia had grown into a young woman with that same spirit. She had learned to help her neighbors, to care for stray animals, and even to volunteer at the local clinic whenever she had the chance. Yet today, her compassion had to fight against the harsh reality of her circumstances. Finally, the café came into view. Its polished glass windows reflected the morning sun, the interior sparkling with an elegance Talia had rarely witnessed up close. She took a deep breath, adjusting the straps of the small backpack she carried. Inside were the few essentials she could bring: her mother's almost empty medicine bottle, a couple of coins, and the small paper bag of food she had managed to save. Her heart raced as she pushed open the heavy glass door. The warmth hit her immediately, a stark contrast to the cold streets outside. She could smell the rich aroma of roasted coffee, pastries, and the subtle undertone of expensive perfumes. The patrons glanced up briefly, some with curiosity, others with mild annoyance at her presence. She could feel their eyes judging her every step, but she kept walking, her resolve firm. Talia approached the counter, her hands trembling. She placed the paper bag down softly, almost reverently, as though it were a fragile treasure. "Excuse me," she began, her voice soft but steady. I was hoping someone could help. My mother is very sick, and I don't have the medicine or the money. Her words trailed off as the cafe manager stepped forward, his sharp gaze cutting through her like ice. Talia's stomach knotted. She had known the risk, of course. She had seen the way people like him treated those they considered beneath them. But hope had kept her moving forward. And now, standing here face to face with prejudice and cruelty, she realized that hope was fragile, fleeting. She swallowed hard, gripping the paper bag like a lifeline, praying for mercy in a world that often had none. This was the moment that would test her in ways she had never imagined. Every ounce of courage she possessed would be needed, and every word she spoke would carry the weight of her family's survival. Talia knew she had no choice but to stand tall, even if the world tried to crush her beneath its unforgiving heel. The moment of confrontation loomed closer, a storm on the horizon. And as she looked at the faces around her, patrons sipping coffee, chatting quietly, avoiding eye contact, she understood with painful clarity that she would have to rely on herself alone. The world might not care about her, but she could not afford to falter. Not today, not when her family's lives depended on her. The city streets were alive with the rush of morning traffic, the honking of impatient cars, and the hurried footsteps of people chasing deadlines. Talia navigated the chaos carefully, clutching the small paper bag that contained her mother's almost empty medicine and the meager food she had saved. Her heart pounded in her chest, not just from the exertion of the walk, but from the anxiety that gnawed at her every thought. The streets weren't kind to someone like her. The polished shoes of businessmen clicked sharply against the pavement, brushing past her with an almost imperceptible disdain. The glass-fronted stores glimmered with luxury, their wares displayed behind spotless windows, a world apart from her own life. She passed a mother and daughter laughing together as they left a bakery, a box of pastries cradled between them. The laughter stung her ears. She knew Malik would have loved even one of those pastries just to taste sweetness for a moment. Each step toward the cafe was a mix of hope and dread. Hope because somewhere inside she believed that maybe, just maybe, someone would help. Dread because the world had rarely shown her kindness, and today she could not afford to fail. She tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear and adjusted the worn straps of her backpack, feeling the small paper bag pressing against her side like a lifeline. When the cafe finally appeared, its polished glass doors gleaming in the morning sun, Talia hesitated. She took a deep breath, whispering to herself, "You can do this. For Mama. For Malik." Her hand shook as she pushed open the door, stepping into a world that seemed to shimmer with wealth and privilege. The warmth inside was immediate, a stark contrast to the chill outside. Soft music played, mingling with the hum of polite conversation. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee and baked goods filled her senses, making her stomach ache, not from hunger, but from the contrast between her life and the lives around her. She approached the counter slowly, careful to avoid drawing attention to herself. Her voice was soft but steady. "Excuse me, I was hoping someone could help. My mother is sick, I don't have enough medicine." She trailed off, fear tightening her throat. The manager appeared then, as if materializing from the shadows. He was tall, impeccably dressed, with sharp features and a gaze that seemed designed to pierce through anyone who dared to step into his domain. His eyes landed on Talia and a smirk spread across his face. "And what exactly do you think you're doing here?" He said, voice laced with condescension. "This is not a charity. This is not a shelter. You do not belong here." Talia's grip on the paper bag tightened. I just need a little help. My mother, she's very sick. I don't have the money to buy her medicine." Her words trembled, but she forced herself to speak. The manager laughed, a harsh, grating sound that seemed to echo against the polished walls. "Help, you want help? Look at you. You're a mess." He gestured at her clothing, at her shoes. "Do you have any idea how ridiculous you look standing here begging for charity? This is not your world." Talia felt her cheeks burn with shame. She looked around at the other patrons, hoping for even a small sign of sympathy. But their eyes quickly flicked away, returning to their phones, their conversations, their coffee cups. The silence was a condemnation. She was alone, completely, painfully alone. I just, she began, trying to explain again, but the words caught in her throat. Her hands shook and the paper bag slipped slightly in her grasp. The manager stepped closer, towering over her. "Just what?" he sneered. "You think your little story matters to me? Do you think I care about your family's problems? I have my own business to run." His tone was venomous, and each word felt like a lash. Her heart pounded. She had imagined that asking for help would be hard, but she had never imagined humiliation like this. "Please." She whispered, "Just a little help, just the medicine, maybe some food." The manager's face twisted in mockery. "Food, medicine, oh, I see now. You're one of those people who think the world owes them something. You're nothing, a beggar, and you should be grateful we even let you set foot in this place." The words hit Talia like a physical blow. Her hands clutched the bag to her chest, as if holding it tighter could shield her from the cruelty surrounding her. Her lips trembled and a single tear slid down her cheek. She blinked rapidly, trying to hold back the sobs that threatened to escape. "Stop staring at me," the manager shouted, turning his wrath toward the other patrons. "Do any of you have a problem with this? Do you think she deserves charity? She's a beggar, a nobody. This is her place." Still, no one moved. No one spoke. The silence of the crowd pressed down on Talia, heavier than the manager's words. She felt her resolve falter, her strength draining away. She was just a girl, a black woman in a world that often refused to see her humanity, and right now she felt the weight of every injustice she had ever endured. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I didn't mean to. Sorry," he barked, cutting her off. "Sorry doesn't fix anything. You think your apologies can erase your shame? You think begging can buy you dignity? Get out of my cafe before I call the police." Talia's chest tightened. She had never been treated like this in public, humiliated for daring to ask for help. Her stomach knotted as she considered turning and leaving, retreating to the streets that were cruel but at least familiar. But then, a small flame of hope flickered inside her. Perhaps someone somewhere would intervene. Perhaps justice wasn't entirely absent from the world. She pressed her hands together in a silent plea, bracing herself for the inevitable dismissal. Her knees threatened to buckle, her shoulders sagged, and for a fleeting moment it seemed as though the weight of the world might crush her entirely. And then it happened. The door opened behind her with a soft chime, and the atmosphere shifted instantly. A presence entered the room, a figure whose calm authority and quiet confidence demanded attention without raising a voice. Patrons instinctively paused, conversations dying mid-sentence, eyes turning to watch. Talia lifted her tear-streaked face and saw someone she had never met before. The stranger's eyes held warmth, but also a quiet power. Every step they took seemed measured, deliberate, as though the very air around them recognized their authority. The manager stiffened. He had never encountered anyone like this, someone who radiated both compassion and power in equal measure. He straightened his back, his smirk faltering for just a moment, replaced by a flicker of unease. The stranger stopped a few feet away from Talia. "That's enough," they said, their voice calm but carrying the weight of unshakable authority. "Step away from her." The manager's arrogance faltered, replaced with shock and disbelief. "And who are you to tell me what to do?" he demanded, his voice rising with panic and anger. The stranger's gaze met his, steady and unflinching. "I am someone who will not allow injustice to continue unchecked," they said softly, but each word struck like a hammer. "And you, sir, have humiliated someone who did not deserve it." Talia felt a flicker of hope. For the first time that morning, someone had spoken to her not with contempt, but with respect and concern. Her trembling hands clenched the paper bag tightly, and for the first time she dared to believe that she might not be completely alone. But the storm was not over. The confrontation, the humiliation, the tension, everything had built to this moment. And as the manager's face grew red with fury, Talia realized that whatever happened next would change the course of her life forever. The cafe seemed to hold its breath. Talia stood frozen, her hands still clutching the paper bag, her body trembling from both fear and exhaustion. The manager's harsh words still hung in the air, but now a new energy pulsed through the room, an authority so calm, so deliberate, that it seemed to absorb the tension and redirect it. The stranger took another step forward, their presence commanding attention without a word. Every patron in the cafe, regular customers, businessmen, and the few students scattered at corner tables stopped mid-sip, mid-bite, mid-conversation. All eyes were on this person. Talia felt her heart skip a beat. The stranger's face was striking, a calm, dignified expression framed by neat, blonde hair, eyes a piercing shade of blue that seemed to see not just her pain, but the injustice that had brought her here. They wore a finely tailored suit, not flashy, but undeniably powerful, carrying themselves with the quiet authority of someone accustomed to being both respected and obeyed. The manager's smirk faltered. He had spent years cultivating an aura of control in this cafe, and yet for the first time someone stood before him who was immune to intimidation. His voice, once so sharp and unyielding, faltered. Who are you to step in here?" The stranger's voice was calm, smooth, yet heavy with certainty. "I am someone who will not allow injustice in my presence. Step aside." The manager's eyes narrowed, his arrogance flickering but not yet extinguished. "And why should I listen to you? Do you even know what you're—" "I know exactly what you're doing," the stranger interrupted, cutting him off with surgical precision. "You are humiliating someone for no reason other than your own pride. That stops now." Talia felt a lump rise in her throat. She had never heard words like that directed at anyone who had tormented her before. There was no anger, no threat of violence, only unshakable authority paired with unmistakable compassion. The manager, now visibly agitated, took a step closer to the stranger, attempting to regain control. "Do you think you can just walk in here and tell me how to run my business? Who do you think?" The stranger raised a single hand, and the room seemed to tense. "Let me finish," they said calmly. Silence swept through the cafe, heavier than the weight of any punishment. "This girl, this young woman, does not deserve your scorn. You have humiliated her publicly, insulted her dignity, and yet you imagine yourself untouchable. You are mistaken." The manager's jaw tightened. You don't even know her." "That does not matter," the stranger replied, their tone unwavering. "What matters is that you right now have chosen cruelty over compassion, and I will not allow that to continue." Talia's chest heaved. Her eyes flicked between the stranger and the manager, disbelief battling relief. Could it really be possible that someone would stand up for her, someone with the power to make a difference? The manager, now desperate, sneered. "Do you think your words scare me? I have rules, authority, and experience. You cannot." The stranger's smile was slight, almost imperceptible, yet every patron felt it as a wave of calm inevitability. "I am not here to scare you," they said softly. "I am here to remind you that actions have consequences. And some consequences are far more immediate than you imagine." Talia's ears rang with the manager's fury, but she barely registered it. She was focused on the stranger, their eyes, the calm warmth that reached out to her as if to say, "You are not alone." "Step aside," the stranger repeated more firmly this time. The manager glared but hesitated. There was a subtle shift in the room. The air itself seemed to acknowledge the stranger's authority, bending slightly, waiting to see what would happen next. And came the twist. The manager, frustrated and enraged, leaned closer, his voice dripping with contempt. "Who do you think you are? Some rich socialite trying to play hero?" The stranger's eyes hardened slightly, a flash of something almost imperious breaking through their calm demeanor. "You have no idea," they said. "I am not just some socialite. I am the CEO of this company." Gasps rippled through the cafe. Patrons leaned forward, astonishment etched on every face. The manager's eyes widened in shock. "What? What did you say?" "I am the CEO," the stranger repeated, voice steady, commanding, undeniable. And this young woman you have humiliated, this young woman is under my protection. You have just humiliated a member of my responsibility, and you will face the consequences." The manager's face drained of color. The arrogance that had fueled his cruelty faltered under the weight of reality. He stammered, trying to regain composure. "Why you can't, this is—" "I can," the CEO said firmly. "And I will." Talia's eyes filled with tears, but this time they were not of shame. They were tears of relief, disbelief, and burgeoning hope. Someone had seen her, truly seen her, and had the power to act. Her trembling hands relaxed slightly, the paper bag clutched against her chest no longer a burden but a symbol of her resilience. The CEO's gaze softened as they turned toward Talia. "Are you all right?" they asked, their voice gentle now, carrying warmth and genuine concern. "You've been through a lot, and none of this was your fault." Talia swallowed hard, words caught in her throat. I didn't know, I didn't think anyone would." "You're not alone anymore," the CEO interrupted softly. "You don't have to face this by yourself." The manager, still sputtering, tried to interject. "You can't just, this isn't fair, I run this place." The CEO's gaze returned to him, ice in their voice now, unwavering and undeniable. "You have humiliated someone who deserved respect, and that is unacceptable. Effective immediately, you are suspended pending review. Your behavior is intolerable." The manager's mouth opened and closed, searching for words, finding none. The room had gone completely silent, every patron watching in awe as justice unfolded before their eyes. Talia blinked, unable to process the magnitude of what was happening. The fear, the humiliation, the weight of the world pressing down on her, it all began to lift, replaced by a warmth she had only dared to dream of. The CEO turned fully toward her now, their eyes softening again. "Come with me," they said, extending a hand, not commanding but inviting. "You and your family should never have to struggle like this. I can help, and I want to make sure you are safe and cared for." Talia hesitated for a moment, her heart racing, mind swirling with disbelief. Could it really be this simple? Could someone truly change her life with a single act of kindness? Slowly, she placed her hand in the CEO's. The warmth of their touch sent a shiver of hope through her entire body. The paper bag she had clutched so tightly now felt lighter, as if the burden of shame and fear had begun to lift. "You don't have to worry anymore," the CEO said, giving her a reassuring smile. "I've got you." The manager, realizing the full scope of what had just happened, sank back into his chair, defeated, powerless. The café, once a place of shame for Talia, now felt like the threshold of a new life. For Talia, the world had shifted in an instant. From the depths of humiliation and fear, a new reality had emerged, one filled with compassion, protection, and hope. The stranger who had walked in at just the right moment was not just a savior, but the beginning of a life she had only dared to imagine in her dreams. As the CEO led her gently away from the counter, Talia's mind raced with questions, awe, and gratitude. This was more than an act of intervention. It was a promise. A promise that the cruelty of the past would no longer define her future. And in that moment, the story of Talia's life was about to take a turn that no one, least of all the cruel manager, could have anticipated. The café, once alive with the soft murmur of polite conversation, had grown eerily quiet. Patrons sat frozen in their seats, eyes darting between the humiliated manager and the resolute figure of the CEO, who now stood protectively beside Talia. The once imposing man who had wielded arrogance and cruelty like a weapon now found himself stripped of authority, powerless in the face of someone who would not tolerate injustice. The CEO's voice rang clear and calm across the room. "Effective immediately, you are suspended pending review. Your behavior, your contempt, your humiliation of a customer is intolerable." The manager's face flushed crimson, a mixture of shame, anger, and disbelief battling within him. He tried to argue to assert dominance, but the CEO's gaze pinned him in place. It was not just authority, it was justice personified. Every patron in the café felt the weight of that moment, the unshakable certainty that wrong had finally been confronted. "But this isn't fair," the manager stammered, his voice trembling. "I've worked here for years, fair," the CEO interrupted, voice rising slightly but still controlled. "Fairness is treating every human being with dignity. Humiliation is never fair, and now, because of your actions, you will face consequences commensurate with your behavior. Human decency is not optional." A subtle murmur ran through the patrons. Some whispered in astonishment, others nodded, understanding that justice had finally been served. The manager's mouth opened and closed, searching for words, but no one came. For the first time, the carefully constructed walls of arrogance he had built around himself crumbled. Turning fully to Talia, the CEO's tone softened. "Are you okay?" Talia blinked, tears spilling freely now, not from fear or shame, but from relief and gratitude. I think so," she stammered. "I didn't think anyone would. You are not alone," the CEO said firmly. "You never have to face injustice by yourself again. From today forward, things will be different for you and your family." Talia's voice caught in her throat. I don't even know how to thank you, I've never had anyone stand up for me like this before." The CEO gave a small, reassuring smile. "You don't need to thank me. Just know that your courage, your integrity, your kindness, they are what matter. I merely ensured that they were respected." As the manager was escorted from the café by the owner and security staff, murmurs of approval and whispers of astonishment swept through the crowd. Talia felt a strange mix of vindication and disbelief. The cruel man who had made her feel invisible, worthless, and humiliated was now powerless, stripped of the very authority he had wielded so carelessly. Once the immediate tension had subsided, the CEO turned back to Talia. "Let's get you and your family the help you need," they said. "First, let's ensure your mother has her medicine and that Malik has food. Then we can discuss longer-term plans." Talia's hands shook as she clutched the CEO's arm. I don't know what to say," she whispered. "I've been afraid for so long, afraid I'd never get help. We didn't have anyone." "You had me now," the CEO said gently, "and I will make sure your family never has to go without again. You have nothing to fear." The CEO guided Talia out of the cafe, their presence steady and reassuring. As they walked, Talia couldn't help but glance back at the now empty cafe counter where her humiliation had taken place. She thought of the manager's cruel laughter, of the eyes that had ignored her plight. And yet that memory was already fading, replaced by the warmth and hope radiating from the person beside her. They arrived at a car parked outside, a sleek black vehicle that gleamed in the morning light. Talia hesitated, overwhelmed by the suddenness of this new reality. I don't want to impose," she said softly. "You're not imposing," the CEO replied, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You deserve help, care, and respect. That is not imposition, it is your right. Come on." Inside the car, the CEO asked gentle questions about Talia's family, about her mother's condition, and about Malik. With each word, each answer, Talia felt layers of fear and doubt peeling away. For the first time, she realized that she was not just being helped, she was being truly seen, truly valued. "We'll take care of your mother first," the CEO said. "She'll have the medicine she needs, and then we'll make sure she receives regular care. Malik will have food, school supplies, everything he needs. And you," their gaze softened, "you will have the chance to pursue your dreams, education, opportunities, guidance, everything that was denied to you because of circumstance I will help provide." Talia's lips trembled and she bowed her head. I don't know what to say. I've never had anyone do this for me before." "You don't need to say anything," the CEO said with a smile. "Actions speak louder than words. Today, your life changes. But only because you never lost your heart, your integrity, or your courage. That is what brought me to you in the first place." Tears rolled freely now, and Talia felt a strange mixture of disbelief, gratitude, and hope coursing through her. She thought of all the nights she had lain awake, worrying if she could pay for her mother's medicine, if Malik would eat, if they would have a roof over their heads. And now, it seemed like those fears could finally be lifted. Days passed, and with each passing moment, the CEO kept their promises. Layla's health improved under proper care, Malik thrived with nutritious meals and school support, and Talia began to explore opportunities she had only dreamed of. The CEO ensured she had tutors, access to educational resources, and a safe environment where she could grow without fear. One evening, as Talia sat in the living room of a new apartment provided by the CEO, she turned to them with tears glistening in her eyes. "I can't believe this is real, that someone would care so much, that someone would." The CEO placed a hand gently on hers. "You made this possible, Talia. Your courage, your perseverance, your kindness. Those were the doors that opened. I merely walked through them with you. Never forget that." Talia nodded, her heart swelling. I want to help others too, just like you helped me. I want to be able to give, not just receive." The CEO's smile was gentle but firm. "And you will. That is the beauty of life. Acts of kindness multiply. One act can change a life, and that life can change countless others. You will honor your family and yourself by carrying that forward." As Talia leaned back in her chair, finally allowing herself to feel safe, loved, and valued, she realized something profound. Her life had transformed, not because she had asked for charity, but because she had never abandoned her heart, her integrity, or her compassion. even in the face of cruelty. The manager, meanwhile, faced swift repercussions. The cafe's owners conducted a thorough review, and he was promptly terminated for his behavior. Word spread quickly, and the public humiliation he had attempted to inflict upon Talia became a cautionary tale about arrogance, prejudice, and cruelty. Justice had been served, and it had been immediate. Talia's life, once overshadowed by fear, poverty, and invisibility, now brimmed with possibility. The CEO's intervention had not only addressed her immediate needs, but had paved the way for a future filled with hope, stability, and opportunity. Her family was safe, her dreams were within reach, and the pain of past humiliation had been transformed into a story of resilience and triumph. And in those quiet moments, as she sat with her mother and brother, Talia whispered a heartfelt prayer of gratitude, not only for the CEO's kindness but for the strength within herself that had carried her through the darkest hours. Years had passed since that rainy morning in the cafe, the day that had seemed so ordinary yet had changed Talia's life forever. The streets she once walked with a mix of fear and hope now felt familiar, but they no longer carried the same weight of despair. The city had not changed, but Talia had. She stood at the window of her new apartment, sunlight streaming through wide, clean panes, reflecting off the polished wooden floors. Her gaze fell on Malik, now 12, laughing as he ran through the small garden in the courtyard below, chasing a ball that Talia had bought for him with her first paycheck from a new job she loved. Her mother, Layla, moved gracefully in the kitchen, preparing a meal with a strength that no longer needed to be tempered by illness. The room was alive with warmth, laughter, and the hum of a life rebuilt. Talia's reflection caught her attention. Gone were the traces of exhaustion that had marked her youth. Her eyes now shone with confidence, her posture radiated assurance. The girl who had once trembled in the face of public humiliation had become a woman who carried herself with quiet dignity, tempered by empathy and the memory of hardships she had overcome. The CEO, whose intervention had saved their lives, remained a constant presence in their story, though not in a patronizing way. They had provided guidance, opportunities, and support, but always respected Talia's independence, allowing her to grow into her own strength. She had completed her education with scholarships arranged by the CEO, worked tirelessly to support causes close to her heart, and had begun mentoring young women in her community who faced challenges similar to those she had once endured. One crisp morning, Talia stood before a room filled with students at a local community center. Her voice, steady and warm, carried the story of courage, resilience, and kindness. "I know what it feels like to be invisible," she said, her gaze sweeping across the attentive faces. "To feel like no one will ever care, like the world is too cruel to be fair. But I am here to tell you that change is possible. One act of kindness, one person who believes in you, can alter the course of your life forever." The room erupted in applause, and Talia smiled, thinking of her mother and Malik, of the CEO who had believed in her when the world had not. She had come full circle, from a young girl afraid to ask for help, to a woman empowered to inspire and uplift others. That evening, as she returned home, she found her family gathered in the living room, the soft glow of lamps casting a warm light on their faces. Malik ran up to her, throwing his arms around her waist. "You told me you'd come watch the sunset with me?" he exclaimed, his voice full of joy. Layla smiled, her hands folded neatly on her lap. "Your daughter has grown into a remarkable woman," she said softly, pride evident in her voice. "She has not only survived, but she has thrived, and she has never lost her heart." Talia hugged them both, a wave of gratitude and love washing over her. "I couldn't have done it without both of you," she whispered. "You gave me reason to keep going, even when I was scared, even when I thought I had nothing." Later, she sat in her study, surrounded by books and papers detailing her work with community projects and educational programs. The desk was cluttered, not with disorder, but with evidence of purpose, a purpose born from hardship, resilience, and the guidance of someone who had recognized her worth when she was at her lowest. Her thoughts drifted to that rainy morning in the cafe, the fear, the humiliation, the hopelessness that had once defined her existence. She remembered the manager's sneering face, the laughter of the patrons who had refused to intervene, and the crushing weight of shame she had carried. And yet in that memory there was also the turning point, the figure who had walked in, calm and powerful, who had reminded her that justice and compassion still existed in the world. She smiled softly, remembering the CEO's words, "You have nothing to fear. I've got you." Those words had been more than reassurance. They had been the key that unlocked a future she had never dared to imagine. Talia now understood the profound truth behind those words. Kindness, courage, and compassion were not just abstract ideals. They were forces that could change the course of a life, even when circumstances seemed insurmountable. And she had witnessed it firsthand. As night fell, she walked out onto her balcony, overlooking the city lights that sparkled like 1,000 tiny stars. Malik's laughter drifted up from the garden below, and Layla hummed softly from the kitchen. The world had not been kind to them, but through resilience, courage, and the intervention of a compassionate soul, their lives had been transformed. Talia's heart swelled with gratitude, not just for the help she had received, but for the opportunity to pay it forward. She had learned that power and wealth were not inherently virtuous, nor was poverty inherently shameful. True value lay in how one treated others, how one chose to respond in moments of crisis. She thought of all the young women and men she had met who faced challenges similar to those she had once known. Their eyes, filled with fear, doubt, and uncertainty, reminded her of herself. And she had a message for them: your circumstances do not define you. Your courage does. In that quiet moment, she made a silent vow. She would continue to help, to inspire, to uplift. She would ensure that no one under her care would feel invisible, powerless, or humiliated again. Every act of kindness she extended would honor the moment when someone had done the same for her. The memory of the CEO's intervention, the calm authority, the compassion, the unwavering commitment to justice, remained etched in her mind. It had been a pivotal point in her life, but it had also been a lesson that one person's courage to act can change the trajectory of another's life forever. Years later, Talia had become a symbol of hope in her community. She had established programs to help families in need, scholarships for students, and initiatives to support those facing health crises. Her story, once defined by despair, had become a testament to resilience, courage, and the transformative power of kindness. As she looked out over the city that had once seemed so cold and indifferent, Talia whispered a quiet reflection, a moral she had carried in her heart ever since that pivotal day. A single act of kindness has the power to change a life. Courage and compassion are stronger than cruelty and fear. And no matter how dark the moment, hope can always be found, sometimes in the most unexpected places. And with that, she turned from the balcony, her heart full, her spirit unbroken, ready to continue a life built on empathy, resilience, and the knowledge that even in a world filled with injustice, goodness could and would prevail. Talia's story, once one of fear, poverty, and humiliation, had become one of triumph, purpose, and hope. A shining example that humanity, compassion, and courage could transform despair into a life filled with opportunity, love, and dignity.